All right, third video. So we just finished off talking about guidelines for purchasing a home. So now getting into the different type of loans. Really, there's two when purchasing a home. There's the conventional and then the FHA. So let's talk about the differences between those. So a conventional loan, and once again, right from the text, you need to be employed and a resident. So be employed and resident of the state that you're purchasing. Typically, you need to provide evidence that you have savings for one or two mortgage payments. So savings for one or two mortgage payments. And then your down payment, you have to have it. You have to have, you can't borrow. And these are really broad requirements. So the FHA loan requirements go as follows. Your total housing expense, it has to be less than 29%. Let me get a little bit more space here. Less than 29% of the buyer's gross income. Buyer's gross income. And then your total monthly payments, less than 41% of gross income. Okay, so I've got a collection of examples from the text, and then there's a few exercises I wanted to go through that would assist you on your problem set. So first thing is, it looks like I made a mistake and I forgot to add a 0 here, but let's take a look at an example 2 from page 798. A family wishes to buy a $164,000 house in a state with high closing costs. And make sure to follow along at page 798 so that you can get any details that I'm just kind of putting in. So if you're like, hey, where did this value come from or this idea come from? I didn't add in all of the example to our notes page, so you'll just need to follow along in the book. So if we're looking at this, the amount of the loan, according to the text, is 90%. So if we do 90% of, 90% of 164,000, that's assuming that the family is doing a 10% down payment. So 90% of $164,000 house is $147,600. So we know that the down payment must be the remaining 10% of the cost. So this is what the family will have to bring to the table. And so we'll just change this to 10%. And it looks like it's $16,000, $16,400 for a down payment. So there's details in the text that say that the minimum cash for FHA is 3%. So 3% down is the minimum. So if we look at that, 3% of 164,000. We're looking at $4,920. So is FHA possible? That'd be the minimum cash that they would have to bring to the table. So if that's the case, Part D asks, what's the max FHA loan the family can get? So for a house that's $164,000, if we bring minimum cash to the table, we're going to take that cash off of the total cost, and then we'll take that difference, and we'll see that the loan that the family can get would be $159,080. So one thing to note is on page 797, for an FHA loan, that 3% can, I'm just going to I'll put this in a sidebar over here, is that page 797, is that the 3% can include 2.25% down payment, as long as the 0.75% is put towards closing costs, right? Homes have closing costs. So there are steps to finding the down payment and FHA loan amount according to the text. And so I'm going to go through 2 steps for that. So step 1 is that you calculate the minimum cash investment, which is what we did, minimum cash investment. And that's 3% of the overall price, 3% of price. And then step 2 is to calculate the down payment. Calculate the FHA down payment, which is what we just did in that previous example. All right, so let's take a look at another example from the text. 798, Mr. McWaters, another Mr. McWaters, is buying a $100,000 home in Florida. As mathematicians, that's really convenient that number is really nice to work with. And he's paying $2,500 in closing costs. So the question is, what's his minimum cash investment? So 3% of $100,000 home is going to be $3,000 minimum cash investment. So when figuring out the maximum loan he can get, we would subtract that from the cost of the home. But with the FHA, when you figure out the down payment, you figure out what the acquisition price is, and you subtract the FHA loan amount to figure that out. Loan amount. So the acquisition is the sum of the house and the closing costs. So for those of you that have purchased a home, you know that sometimes when you go through the roles of acquiring, you have to pay people, pay institutions, pay groups. And so those things are called closing costs. And so the total acquisition is going to be the cost of the home plus the closing costs. And then we're going to subtract the FHA amount. And so if you remember from above in that green box, that can be 2.25% down. So that means that the loan would have to be 97.75%. So minus the loan amount, 97.75% of $100,000. Okay. So what that means is, to figure out Mr. McWaters' down payment, we would take $102,000 and $102,500, and we're going to minus his loan amount. So it's a really nice number to work with, but just for the sake of 97.75% times $100,000 is $97,750. So $97,750, and this is going to yield our down payment, which is $4,750 when we subtract those. And this is in regard to the maximum FHA loan he can get. Okay, so let's take a look at, example 4. So you'll notice that I put bare bones in regarding what information I put in the notes. So you'll have to follow along on page 800. And so, all right, now that I've made space. So the amount of the loan for this circumstance, if you're following along on page 800, is 95% of $100,000. So, whoops, sorry, that shifted on me. 95% of $100,000, which is going to be $95,000 for the amount of the loan. So that means that you can do the down payment two different ways. The down payment is 5% of that $100,000, or you could just take the value minus the loan, and that's how much this person will have to bring to the table, which is $5,000 closing costs. So there's this really important table on this page, table 13.5, and this allows you to figure out the cost for every $1,000 of a loan. So if we go to table 13.5, and for this circumstance, it's a 30-year loan. So you go to the 30-year column, and it's at 7%. So you go to the row that says 7%. And what that says is it's going to cost $6.64 for every $1,000. So to figure out the monthly payment, and that's what this table does for us, we'll take 6.64 and multiply it by 95, because that's how many thousands. This is per $1,000. And this will give us a monthly mortgage payment. So 6.64, 6.64 times 95 means it's going to be $630.80 for this mortgage. All right, so let's go back and see if this person wants to do an FHA loan. They would need to do, let's go back to the original cost. It would have to be 3% of the $100,000. So if they went this route, they would need $3,000 minimum cash investment. So let's say that this person could get an FHA loan with 9%. What would the monthly payment be? So we'll go back to that table again. So minimum cash investment means they would need a loan of $97,000. So if we go to that table, we look at the correct time allotment, match it to 9%, and I'm hoping that you see that the table says $8.05 for every 1,000. So to figure out the monthly payment for this loan, you would do 97 times 8.05. So for this circumstance, we are looking at $780.85 for a mortgage. $780.85 for this mortgage. All right.